Hello, BookTube. It's a bright and sunny Sunday. I thought we'd continue with my library tour. Since I'm all set up, I might as well. I usually don't do these things on the weekends, but we're running out of time to finish this before the end of the year. And I know myself well enough to know that if we don't finish this by the end of the year, who knows when it'll get finished. I might not take it up again in the new year. So we'll do this next shelf, and then we'll forge on Monday. So our smooth sailing is over, it looks like. So we do have transverse books. We'll do those first. This first one is an old Everyman's Library classic collection of Matthew Arnold. This is his essays and literary criticism, all of his book reviews and whatnot. He's infinitely quotable. I love him, just love him. So he, of course, had to be in a bookcase like this. This is mostly about books and writers, books and publishing, just in case I didn't mention that, in case any of you aren't interested in that. That's mostly what you're going to get here. Okay, then... a lifelong book critic, John Carey. This is original copy. I don't know that this ever came out in the United States, but he wrote on everybody. This is from 1969 to 1986, and there are little pieces here, 800-word pieces on everything under the sun, and he is also infinitely quotable. Okay, this next one is not a collection of reviews. This is a newer book. This is by Pamela Paul, of the New York Times, and this is My Life with Bob. And Bob is not a person. Bob is Book of Books, the tattered, enormous, endless reading diary, basically, that she's kept for her whole life. And this is her book about that, but of course, from that beginning, of course, it expands to be about those books and a life of reading. An utterly delightful book. I reviewed it for somebody somewhere. I'll try to remember to leave the link if I can find it. Oh, great. Okay. This next one is a collection of speeches. This is from a while ago. How old is this book anyway? 1989. Okay, I thought it was older than that. This is Maynard Mack, the great biographer Maynard Mack. This is Pros and Cons. Just a thin little thing in which he writes about, all of his favorite subjects, mostly including Shakespeare. Good stuff. Very good stuff to read. It looks like we have a couple of advanced copies, some review copies here. Oh, okay, yeah. Some review copies. These are probably both from last year. The sort of thing that when I get a book like this, I know that it's coming into this room. Unless it's absolutely terrible, I know that it's coming into this room. I have a spot for books about books and collections of reviews and deadline prose, and that's this from the novelist Laurie Moore. This is See What Can Be Done. Essays, criticism, and commentary. The title is an echo, maybe none of you will, is an echo of a late, great New York Review of Books legendary editor, Bob Silver, who would send a book to someone and ask them if anything could be done with it. That was his sort of aristocratic way of asking if a review was possible. He wouldn't usually say, I want a review, and he especially wouldn't usually stipulate that review. I want it by such and such a time at such and such a length. That almost never happened. Instead, it was the weird matchmaking alchemy in his mind would get a book and immediately think of a person. And often the match was a surprise to everybody, including the recipient. And yet some brilliant stuff resulted. His instincts were almost always right in that regard. And that's what the title here. But this is all, I imagine that a lot of these things appeared in the New York Review of Books. That's what the book looked like when it came out. But I don't think I ever saw it. I don't think I ever saw a finished copy of it. Oh, okay. All right. This is another advanced copy, also from 2018, right along the same lines. This is Martin Amis, another very good example of a writer whose fiction I cannot stand, but whose nonfiction, especially writing about books, I really like, or tend to really like. And this is The Rub of Time, also from 2018, so that it would have looked like that. And it's a collection of Amis pieces that I'll read him when he writes about books or literary figures. I'll read him no matter what, even if our tastes don't align at all, so I often don't like what he's writing about. Okay, this is his big book. This is fantastic. Just a must-have book for a section like this. This is The War Against Cliche. 30 years of book reviewing. And there's an x-ray of a manual typewriter. There's a manual typewriter for a good number of those years, maybe all of them. Amos would have pounded out these reviews on a manual typewriter. I know exactly what that felt like. The only thing that I don't share in common with him probably is that I don't have the slightest bit of nostalgia for that time or that technology at all. Not at all. I was one with my manual typewriter to such an extent and over such a vast amount of wordage that I still have it. I didn't get rid of it. I still have it. I was one with it. I knew every single way that it operated. I knew every single piece of equipment that was inside it. I could take it apart and put it back together. And I had to be able to do that because my livelihood depended on it, because a large chunk of my intellectual self depended on it. And there wasn't any helpline. There was no internet. So if I didn't understand that technology perfectly, that piece of technology perfectly, then if it broke, I was useless. I was absolutely helpless. So I got to know it really well. I used it all the time. I was known in my typewriter repair shop, the place. There used to be shops where you would go to get your ribbons or key replacements or spring replacements or whatever. They probably still exist, but they're swarmed with hipsters now, so no one would want to go anywhere near them, except perhaps for some sort of tactical airstrike. If we waited until, I was going to say until they open at 9, but of course hipsters don't wake up until 1. So if we waited until 4, when the half-calf cinnamon swirl cappuccinos kick in, a nice tactical strike on one of those places would probably take out 2/3 of the hipsters in that 3-block radius. But anyway, my point. What was my point before I started rambling? Oh, right. That I use that my typewriter, my version of this every day. Pounded away on it every day, but also cursed it every day. I cursed it every day because if anything went wrong, you had to start over, or be a wizard with whiteout or whatnot, and that wasn't always possible to be. I went through just blocks of the whiteout tabs. Once they came along, you put a tab in if you type the wrong letter. You back up. You put the key right over that. You put the tab between the paper and the key. You hit the key, and the whiteout goes into the groove that you made and effectively erases that letter, and then you can use that. Then you backspace again. You hit the right letter, and you type it in there. And that was, as cumbersome and nightmarish as that must sound to young people out there, that was actually an improvement over the whiteout liquid. It used to be you had to daub a piece of liquid in there into that groove, and there was never a time when I was doing that when I didn't feel like I was at the mercy of something. And the only reason that I didn't get all existential about it is because, like so many other people, including I'm sure a young Martin Amis, I never imagined that there was an alternative. Never in a million years did I imagine. I never even guessed. For all the science fiction that I read, I never guessed that there might be an alternative, that there might come along a technology in my lifetime that would allow me to write a paper in a weird state of electronic superposition. The review that I work on today is not written at all. These are electronic symbols. I can change anything I want at any time without changing anything about the finished product. It's all of that is self-evident to all of you, but it is amazing. It never ceases to be amazing to me. I never lose my wonder at that simple thing that so many centuries of scholars yearned for. Not just typewriting people, but handwriting people and hand copying people before that. Oh my God. And all of us who lived and died by snail mail, friend to friend snail mail, where that was your contact with them long distance because you weren't going to call. You weren't going to use a phone. And then, of course, there was, 100 years ago, there were no phones. So that was literally your only contact with your distant friends. And you would just wait. You would just wait and yearn. Oh, God. Talk about Hazlitt and Matthew Arnold and all these people. They would have dreamed about the internet and instantaneous emails and whatnot. Anyway, let's move on here. Oh my. Okay, this has got to be from the Brattle. This is old. This is William Dana Orcutt, who was a fixture at the Harvard University Press, and then he went on to the Plimpton Press and stayed there as a fixture forever and ever. He was a bookman. He was a typography guy. Wrote a ton of books. Read all the time. This is one of those. He and I went to the same class at Harvard University. We graduated from the same class at Harvard University. This is from my library walls. And this is not so much book writing. there are books out there by him on books. I wish I had some of them. I never come across him. He wrote a whole bunch of books. This is the only one I've ever seen at the Brattle. But this one is more about people that he knew, and also literary figures that he sort of dreamed that he knew, people that, long preceded him, where he would just imagine them. He's a very delightful writer. I wish I had more of his books. But let's see here. What is... Oh, goodness gracious. All right, well, this thing's huge. It's unmistakable on any library shelf. This is Christopher Hitchens. This is arguably his enormous collection of deadline prose, of reviews and essays and profiles and whatnot. Really, for form's sake, I ought to put it right next to Martin Amis. This is inexhaustible. It has its flaws. Someday, maybe David Mercer and I will do a read-along, arguably. Someday we might do that. It'll kill us both. But it has its flaws. It has its longueurs. It has its rants. But you take that all in all with Hitchens, and it's my favorite thing by him, predictably enough. It's my favorite thing by him by a wide margin. It should be with... I think I have 2 other of his collections. It should be with them, but I grab it all the time. Anyway, a little bit less... I grab it a little bit less in the winter than in the summer, because the positioning... just random chance, the positioning has it... it's usually on the shelf that's occluded by my electric space heater. How so silly is that? And the space heater isn't touching the books. It isn't endangering them. It's not going to cause anything to catch fire. But you'd have to move it to get at the books down there. This room is very small, so it's like a ship's cabin. So sometimes that is necessary. Okay, all right. This next one is the big Viking hardcover of something that we've seen just recently in paperback. This is the big Viking hardcover of the complete prose of Marianne Moore, the great poet. This is all of her... it's not the complete prose, because it's not letters, but it's essays and addresses and speeches and whatnot. And I just got this floppy penguin trade paperback. So I temporarily have both of these, but I don't need both of them. I just need the one. Let's see here. Oh, what's this? We have a little visitor. Oh, they're going to want to see you, baby. Oh, they're going to want to see you. Understandable. We are in her territory, after all. Okay, this next one is another 2018 release. This is... Hi, baby. How you doing? How you doing? Are you going to get in the way? Huh? Are you going to get in the way? Huh? What you doing? What you doing? I'm talking to the camera. You must think that's so strange. How's the baby? Huh? I would have needed a forklift to get Lucy up on my lap like that, and I would be dead as a result of it. Anyway, what were we saying? Oh, right, yes. This is Zadie Smith, who is fantastic at the sort of thing that I'm talking about. Fantastic at book writing, book reviews, book essays, ruminations, and whatnot. Her latest piece in the New York Review of Books notwithstanding, it was a weak spot, but I'm sure that it'll be venerated in time. It'll be in the next volume like this. This is Feel Free, her 2018 collection of that kind of literary essays and occasion pieces and whatnot. Always glad to have it. I usually love her stuff when it appears. So, okay, all right. We have seen this author before. We saw him a long time ago. Good Lord, how long ago? I'm trying to spot it on the shelf. This is William Dean Howells, the great William Dean Howells. And this is My Literary Passions, Criticism and Fiction. So this is an earlier volume, an earlier collection of his criticism, which we saw probably 6 of these tours ago, or not. I had an ex-library book of his literary criticism, and this is the same thing. This is, Tennyson and Thackeray and whatnot. I think, yeah. That's William Dean Howells at age 18. Before he had the big walrus mustache. Then this next one is someone we've also seen before. This is Michael Dirda, who has a number of these books, has a number of things like this, and collections like this. He has a deal to just keep doing these, and it's a wise thing. Every writer should have should regularly make these books. But a lot of publishers won't do it. A lot of publishers won't go for it because you need some sort of cachet. Otherwise, a publisher will think, what's the point of writing, of putting a book together of old book reviews. It's helped if you've won the Pulitzer Prize. that pretty much guarantees that you can do such a thing. And this is Michael Dirda's book, Browsings, which is, again, what do we have here? This is just him writing about the books that cross his path. So, Bookish Pets, Armchair Adventures, Books on Books, Spring Book Sales, Anglophilia, anthologies and collections, stuff like that. He's just endlessly interesting on books. So it doesn't really matter what he writes about. I'll still read it. I'll still keep it in this room. Okay. This next one is a classic. It is great. It is a great work of this kind. This is Occasional Prose by Mary McCarthy. That is our author. This is not in print anymore, and this is her mostly writing about literary stuff. There's one section in here that I go to more often than not, which is explicitly literary reflections, reviews, and literary essays. There's also a section in here on obituaries of people that she's known, some of which obituaries are heart-wrenching. Just a great classic of this kind of writing. Okay, and then we finish up with something that I once thought it was a great classic of this kind of writing. Now I have lots of ambivalence about it. This is Nobody's Perfect by Anthony Lane. And it's all about movies and TV and books and authors. This author is incredibly good when he writes about writing and about books. And none of that has changed. The only reason that I am ambivalent is because I virulently dislike him now. Because for the New Yorker, he somehow got past self-respecting editors who have to go home to their families at night. A review of a children's movie in which he describes at length pleasuring himself at the premiere. And that should have got him fired. It should have made him unemployable anywhere else. It should certainly have gotten an editor fired. If it didn't get Amos fired, or Anthony Lane fired, it should have gotten an editor fired for allowing it to get into the magazine. It was a profanation. It was a disgusting exhibition of a bored writer. If you're bored with your job, then get another job. Don't take it out on your job. And don't take it out on me as a reader. And it happened in conjunction with the vilification of another figure. It was right around the same time that the TV and movie star Zac Efron was walking the red carpet at the premiere of his Lorax movie, children's movie premiere, when a condom accidentally popped out of his pocket and fell onto the red carpet in front of screaming fans, in front of paparazzi, and in front of a large number of children. And once again, that was boredom mixed with, I might make these kids' movies for bankable money, but I want you to still think I'm cool. And it should have resulted in immediate social ostracization. He should never have worked or been invited to any parties or any gatherings ever again. And it was just because of our debased age, it didn't mean anything. Same thing with Anthony Lane. He still has a job at the New Yorker. In fact, right after he wrote that piece, he became their sole movie critic. So in the parlance of 2016, nothing matters, but it matters to me. If Anthony Lane were to come out with another big collection of bookish stuff and literary reviews and whatnot, I doubt very much that I would even look at it, much less put it in this room. I doubt very much that I would. It's not that the quality of his work has disappeared. It's that I can't think anymore of anything but that thing that he did when I read his work. It's purely me. But anyway, that is it. That is this shelf. We will move on to the last shelf here tomorrow. And then we'll be done with this bookcase. We'll just move straight on to the next one. It looks to me, just glancing informally, it looks to me like this explicit concentration of books about books and writing is about to end, or at least thin out. So there'll be more interest, there'll be more general interest stuff coming up. So I will see you then. We'll reconvene until tomorrow. Thank you, BookTube.